Today's episode of Filmmaker U is brought to you by our sponsors OWC. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking and computer needs. And it's also brought to you by our other sponsors, AJA. Make sure to check out aja.com so that you can see how they can help you in your post-production needs. Hi, I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. Every week, we're joined by a professional to discuss their work, and this week I'm joined by editor Jeff Seibenick, whose work includes The Mandalorian, The Book of Boba Fett, and Eastbound and Down, just to name a few. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I guess, my first question for you, when we were off air, you were talking about rooming with Danny McBride. I'm wondering if you can tell me about that. How did that happen? What's the story behind that?
Well, we all went to the same school together. We went to the North Carolina School of the Arts. And it was me and Jeff Fradley, who was also a writer on Eastbound and Vice Principals and now The Righteous Gemstones. Mm-hmm. And we just lived together for our last 2 years of film school. And also we went to school with Jody Hill, who's a director on all those shows, and David Gordon Green, who's a director all over the place. And a bunch of other people. Our production designer, Richard Wright, went to that school. My assistant editor was a buddy of mine from that school who's also a roommate of mine for several years, Mike Lucas, who's now working with me on The Mandalorian. Working on those shows with the Rough House crew was just kind of like, it was like getting to hang out with your college buddies. And, we had such a small school.
Yeah.
I think the entire school was, I think, like 1,500 or 2,000 people. And that was divided a bunch, all the concentrations like, art and design and dance and music and drama. And so the film school, I think across the 4 classes, I was the second class to graduate from that school. I think there were maybe 40 people in the whole film school. So we were all tight-knit group. It was a bunch of nerds from high school who finally found a group of friends who liked exactly what they liked. So we were all like instant friends.
And did you help with the Taekwondo movie that he made?
I did. Yeah. That was my first feature editorial credit. I remember we edited that in my kitchen in my studio apartment, which was probably smaller than this whole office, which is, where I work now. This is outside of in back of my house. So I've moved up a little bit. Now here I am editing in this, and the only difference is there's no kitchen.
Now you're obviously a fan of Star Wars. So how did you get?
What makes you think that?
What was it like getting involved with The Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett?
Oh man, I mean, if I was going to tell myself at age 6 that you're going to be editing the new Star Wars TV series, I would have lost my mind. I would have gone insane. Obviously, I've been a Star Wars fan all my life. It was literally what propelled me into filmmaking. I used to devour those movies as a kid, as most 40-somethings do nowadays. Yeah. I think it's kind of hard because I think the goal is to try to keep the young kids involved or get them interested in this beautiful, brilliant, amazing world that just kind of like offers such good fantasy storytelling, I think. But it just so happened that I signed on to a new agency, back in like 2017 or 16. And one of the first jobs they hooked me up with was I got to edit the pilot for Young Sheldon. Mm-hmm. And the reason I wanted that job was because Jon Favreau was directing it. And I was a huge fan of Jon Favreau's all through film school. I mean, Swingers was one of my generation's, like biggest movies because it spoke to us in that time. And it even to this day is still brilliant.
The Gretzky scene just kills me. Where he takes Gretzky out, just kills me.
I know. Every time. Everything about that movie, even to this day, it's just like, I mean, it's dated, but it speaks to that generation so well. And it was a great movie at the time. And so I learned about him through that. And then I remember he did Elf, which I've loved to this day. It's one of the best Christmas movies out there. And he did Zathura, which was not a big hit at the time, but me and my friends in college loved it. It's a kid's movie. Yeah. But the way he did it, we appreciated so much how he did practical effects and practical creatures. And it was a suspenseful movie that wasn't dumb for kids. It was like anybody of any age could enjoy it and appreciate it for all of its worth. I have a 3-year-old daughter now who loves Zathura because it's so scary. You know what I mean? And So getting to work with Jon Favreau was kind of like, check it off the bucket list. I'm like, hell yeah. And we hit it off. I thought we did a good job on the pilot. We had fun. And when I used to work in an office, I'd bring some Star Wars toys in just to decorate my desk and make it like, kind of comfortable. And he noticed it and he mentioned it. And I was like, yeah, dude, weren't you supposed to do like a Star Wars thing back before J.J. Abrams did? And I think this was before The Force Awakens even came out, or it maybe had just been announced. And John told me about his, originally he had planned on maybe doing a Boba Fett movie, but that kind of fell through. And I just said right there, it's like, dude, listen, if you ever do anything Star Wars, ever, don't look anywhere else for an editor. And he said, okay, fine, deal. Then we went on and did our own thing. Maybe a year later, a buddy of mine texted me, and the first thing in the morning I woke up and I saw this Hollywood Reporter blurb about Jon Favreau signs on to do Star Wars series. I literally emailed him right then and there. Hey, John, remember me? It's Jeff Seibenick. Well, it looks like you're doing that Star Wars series, so when you need an editor, don't call or don't look very far. And sure enough, he emailed me right back. He said, yeah, it'd be great to work together again. A week later, I hear from the head of Lucasfilm production, post-production. 2 weeks after that, I'm walking in and I'm literally the very first guy in post-production on The Mandalorian season 1.
Wow.
Am I dreaming? It was a dream, absolute 100% dream come true. And I've been on it since 2018.
Well, that show pioneered the virtual production workflow. So what were, like, I know that editing, you're just getting the footage in a lot of cases, but like what I've heard from, like when I looked it up in Unreal and stuff, that you guys had to go early to help sort of map things out or something like that, or how did virtual production impact you?
It's funny. This is the one question we keep getting asked about, and it's not so much a post-production thing.
Mm-hmm.
The best thing for us about the virtual backgrounds is that when we're editing a scene, you can feel the scene because there's a set or a skyline or a sun or a planet, or like even sometimes they would build, you'd have a desk and then a pillar and then the entire wall would be on the video screen, but it looked like this massive warehouse. Mm-hmm. So it's just kind of cool in terms of being able to see the show for what it's going to be before they spend all the time on the visual effects. In terms of the editing, not much really impacted us as far as what we do. It's still get the footage, watch the takes, figure out the best way to tell the story visually, find the best performances. Although, in some instances, a lot of the characters don't have faces, so you can pretty much stay and do whatever you want, after the fact. But we started to learn quickly that, there is a cool benefit to having a character with no face, because the smallest head move or a tilt or a shift in the body weight says so much visually. You don't even need a line there. You know what I mean? And it kind of like almost, it was an interesting thing as an editor to start using those performances as opposed to a look or an eye or a mouth or something that, you would normally cut to as a dramatic beat. You get this little tiny movement, like the more subtle, the better. And it becomes this big, like subtextual thing in the character's performance. It's really actually kind of awesome.
I love,
I got thrust into that from, up until that point, I had done indie features, really indie features, and a bunch of comedy TV shows, mostly with my friends. So it was a huge, huge learning curve for me coming into this massive production. Especially, I was literally the only person in post for probably a month or two when they were still working out previs, which is, it's kind of like this computer animated version. And John wanted to do all of the episodes in previs first, and that would inform what sets we would use for real and what sets would be on the wall and all this stuff. Like, so I was kind of there. It's basically been in this process that the editors start at the same time the script is done. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, we're on early, and we're on through all of the development process. We're on through all of the shooting and then all of the post process. It's really kind of amazing to be involved this much throughout the entire production process, because what we do informs what they do, because they want to see it. Like they can write it, but once they see it, it's like, oh wait, let's do this, we can shoot that, we can do, it's like we're really helping them make creative decisions as well as us. Mm-hmm. It's really cool. It's a great process, and it's like I said, dream come true. It's amazing every day on the job.
What would you say are some of the things that you because you said it was a huge learning experience. What were some of the things you needed to learn that you think young people should be learning when they're at schools now, or learning before they jump on this job, a big job like this?
In terms of editing, for me, it was the learning curve for me was just about how a big production works, working with department heads and schedules and directors and big producers like John and Dave and Colin Wilson, who's one of our executive producers. He has been one of Spielberg's guys forever. He came from post-production. He was an assistant editor on Raiders of the Lost Ark, which I was just like, I keep begging him to tell me stories, and he's so coy about it. He won't tell me anything. But working with people who have literally been on some of the biggest movies that I've ever seen, that I love all my life, it's kind of nuts. Mm-hmm. It's kind of nuts to be like texting and phone calls and walking through offices with professionals. And I realized sometimes that maybe I was a little bit too excited. So I learned how to curb my enthusiasm a bit, but also offer when it was necessary and do, the job. But in terms of editing goes, man, I mean, like literally as a filmmaker, editors are essential to the process. It's like you're helping to figure out the best way to tell the story with the footage you're given. What we had the access to by doing previs and being involved all the way through production is that I'm actually able to give ideas at an early stage that would inform not only some of the shots, some of the shooting, some of the storytelling, but also like they would maybe see something that I had cut and say, oh wait, we should rewrite this to work with that, and da 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 da. So it was like, it was collaborative in the sense that by being able to show them early, they were able to work through it. But as an editor, you're doing, it's about the storytelling, it's about the visuals, the performance, the flow of the dramatic arcs, etc. So it's kind of all the stuff that but applied on a great big scale.
Now, you've been a fan of Star Wars your whole life. How did you feel in the 90s when they re-released them with like all the digital upgrades?
Man, at first I was stoked. I was like beyond happy. And I went and saw them all in the theater, and I appreciated them for what they were. I didn't like some of the things as much as other things, like I feel like Empire Strikes Back is still the crowning achievement of that whole series. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's the one they did the least amount to. Whatever they added to it, I think made it better. I thought New Hope, that scene with Jabba and Han Solo, it was cool to see, but it didn't really work. And I think CGI was too young at that time to really pull it off. Obviously the Greedo shooting first, no. But in hindsight, everybody's a hater. So, and I'm not. I appreciated it for what it was at the time, and I can still see. I get it. I understand. It's not my favorite. That's why I scrounge for the despecialized versions, which But it doesn't stop me from literally. I think one of the things you asked me on the email was what kind of things I use for inspiration. Yeah. And I'm telling you, when there's a Star Wars marathon on TBS or TNT, no matter what, if it's the prequels or the trilogies or the whatevers, I put them on during the day. I just kind of have them on in the background. It's still like comfort food,
Yeah. My whole youth we had a VHS with Star Wars that we recorded the first time it ever aired on TV. And so because it was such a special event, they had like the actors would do these little interstitials between the commercials.
Cool.
And they come on and be like, this is the cool thing that happened this time when we were shooting this. And it was like so weird because there was scenes removed so it could fit into and then one day someone like rented the DVD and it was like, what is happening? Like all these scenes and everything was assembled differently for me. I was just like, this is weird.
You know what? That happened to me when I got the widescreen,
Yeah.
the letterbox VHSs. Like I had, I've probably bought Star Wars 800 times every time they release a new version. And I remember, like you said, it's like at the beginning of New Hope, it pans down and all you see is a planet. Well, shit, when you get the widescreen, it's like, oh my God, there's another moon up there. You can see the whole Star Destroyer. I was just like, oh my God, this is what Letterbox is all about. I was so excited.
Totally.
It was like a new movie.
Yeah. No, it was crazy. Now so you mentioned like because everyone was wearing the masks in things like the Mandalorian, you could work with just the movements and tell so much more. Were there big changes, or were you able to do any major changes to the actors delivery if you added any ADR later that changed a bit of the story, or was it
absolutely absolutely.
Anything stick out in your mind in that?
No, I mean, not really. It's kind of, you know what it is? It's kind of like they do that on all the movies all the time. Once you see it in the edit, you realize that maybe this is a better way to say something, or maybe you could use a line here. And we just had the benefit of being able to put it on the guy's face as opposed to like an over the shoulder or some kind of like insert, you know what I mean? The best thing though is, in doing even to this day, in doing all the previs, I end up recording all of the dialogue for the Mandalorian and most of the other characters, just to temp in, you know what I mean? And I think it was just nice once we started hearing Pedro and not me. Yeah. that was a little shock.
Have you ever had any of your scratch track end up in the film?
Yeah, baby. Oh yeah.
I know a few editors who are like, I hate hearing it every time, but
you ready? There. You ready? Here it is.
Yep.
We have you 4-1. That was a stormtrooper in the first episode when he goes into the client's office and they pull out the gun. Drop your weapons. We have you 4-1. That was me. They tried to replace that with a real voice actor, but they just couldn't match the level of asshole-ishness that they thought I could deliver. So they kept my voice, and that was really
authenticity.
Yes, authenticity.
Yeah. Were you excited that they were taking it back to the Western, sort of that Western motif?
100%, because that's what Star Wars storytelling is. It's always about the fringes. It's like the world around the world where all the interesting things happen. So I was very excited about that. Yeah.
And were you a fan of Westerns beforehand, or like, did you follow them a lot?
I mean, I didn't devour them, not like Tarantino does. I like, I like the contemporary Westerns more. I like the stuff that's been coming out, more recently, because I appreciate them as an homage to the old stuff. But to be honest with you, I always thought the spaghetti Westerns and stuff, I always thought they were cheap, and I never liked the dubbing. It always bumps for me how kind of like, I don't know. I know this is like sacrilegious and people will be upset at this, so I'm not going to say any more on it, but I was never a fan. I'm never a fan of the old Westerns.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I'm just thinking from a story perspective and structuring the show, if you leaned on any of that.
Well, I think that the story structure in terms of Westerns or not, it's classic hero archetypes. Mm-hmm. It's classic, character arcs and hero storytelling. If you read the what's his name, Hero with 1,000 Faces. Yeah. The book that every storyteller is given when they go to study filmmaking. It's I think it's just an interesting and clever, creative way to tell the same story, which isn't to say that it's bad. That's what storytelling has been for centuries. And I like the way that that John and Dave decided to do this one. It was great.
Now, did you feel, were you worried about taking on the Book of Boba Fett, considering how popular that character is?
No, I was excited about it. I was looking forward to seeing what they were going to do with it. I thought, I was really stoked to see where it was going to go and how they were going to do it.
Yeah. Now, what would you say is the most challenging scene you've had on Book of Boba Fett or Mandalorian in terms of editing?
Man, every scene presents itself with different challenges. And I can say in season 1,
Mhm.
I think me editorially, one of the scenes that I had the most challenge with was the last episode when IG-11 says that he's going to go sacrifice himself for the child.
Mhm.
And the way that it was shot, obviously they didn't have an IG-11 there. They had a guy in a gray suit with dots on it and a helmet with a fake head on it so that they had an eye line, and he wasn't even really performing. So it was hard. It was really hard for me to edit a dramatic scene that was supposed to have impact when I was working with like stand-ins and placeholders, because I hadn't ever done that before. But I remember working really closely with John on that and going through it a lot of different ways. And he, you know, in his infinite knowledge, was able to tell me like, well, no, this is gonna, you know, you got to remember this is going to be a robot and this is going to be a baby, and you know, this is going to be a lot, and hold on this and cut to that. And we did a lot of really good sessions on that where it started to like click for me. It's like, oh, right, I'm not cutting what they shot, I'm cutting what we're going to add. So I had to kind of like become sort of an imagination VFX guy as I was doing that, so that I could then basically cut what I imagined would be there. And so I used that skill going forward, and it became a little bit easier when a lot of what you're shooting is not there.
Mhm.
You know, it's either not there at all and you have to imagine it and time it out, or, you know, like we have the previs as a guide, but what we're doing with previs is then you're taking that, cutting it out, kind of slapping it in there, and then sort of moving it around so for placement and timing, but it's, you know, it's rough.
Yeah.
Our other editor, Andrew Eisen, he's a genius at integrating the previs, because he spends a lot of time with roto and doing all this stuff, and I don't have the patience for that, so I just kind of like cut and paste it, slap it in there so that you can see something. But that gives me a tiny indication. But then as we go, man, it's never done until it's done. And you know, months after they wrap, we're starting to see visual effects come in, and John will give edit notes, and we'll go back and tweak a scene, and then we'll see the shot start to like materialize and become more real, and it starts to inform all these different ideas. So we're constantly adjusting things based on what we see, and that's a benefit to this kind of production, because, you know, in the past, like on Eastbound and Down or Vice Principals, when we had a visual effects shot, we'd have to lock the scene, send it off, they would give us just enough frames for that shot, and then we'd be done. But, you know, we weren't dealing with full CGI characters or digital characters. I would say that, you know, in terms of big action scenes, which is some of my favorite stuff to do, it's just hard because a lot of what's going to be in the shot isn't there, and you have to kind of imagine it. And then even when you show it, you sometimes you have to put chyrons on the screen that just say, you know, Mando jetpacks off to the left, and then you cut to an empty frame with a chyron that says Mando lands here. You know what I mean? Because you don't have it, but you need it to tell that little bit of the story. So that's the challenge, I think, for working on the show. But it's so satisfying when you finally get to see it done. In doing the previs on the first season, and I told you how I was recording all my own voices and stuff like that, I remember we were trying to find a sound for the baby, for Grogu. And, you know, me and the other editors quickly realized that there is a limited library of baby sound effects in the world, and they're all the fucking same. And we would hear them in like commercials, and like I remember I had Tarzan on, the animated Tarzan was on TV, and I heard all of the same exact baby sounds that I was using in my previs cut. And I'm like, well, I can't, this sucks. Well, lucky for me, it just so happened that I had a baby, my first child, on that first season. Actually, I was in production when we had her, and I remember one morning she was in her bassinet and she started making all these crazy like cute and gross noises. So I started recording her, and I cut her in. And John and Dave kind of said, "Wow, that's good. Yeah, let's keep that. Let's keep that." So to this day, my daughter is
Grogu.
part of the voice of Baby Yoda.
Wow.
Which is really cool. I mean, that's a really cool thing. And no, we don't get, it's a sound effect, so it's like she's not credited and it's not going to be a thing. But as like a little bit of a fan tidbit.
One of my first jobs in the industry was cataloging sound effects. So like sound designers would go out, record stuff, give me the files. I'd have to cut them, set them up. It drove me nuts whenever I hear certain sounds because you're like, they get used way too much.
Yeah, they get used way too much. And it's like, dude, there's better sounds. I've heard them.
Yeah.
You know what? No, maybe you know this. There's a gasp, like a crowd gasp. Yeah. Oh! And it's in everything. And I will never use it because once I used it once, and I hear it everywhere. Yeah. I'm like, I can't believe that's all we have for gasps.
Yeah. Someone's got to get a group. I just remember I had like 18 hours of trains from London. And it was just like, cut these, because they were so fed up of having all those, here's the same train. And then it was like, here's 20 hours of like people. And it was just crazy.
You're a sound guy. You're a sound guy and a post guy and a Star Wars fan. So you'll appreciate this. The first day that I started, I didn't have any sound effects, and I kind of had to beg, borrow, and steal to get the Lucasfilm library of Star Wars sound effects. Dude, I'm telling you, that day that those came in, I spent the whole day just listening to Star Wars sound effects, like doors, amazing, spaceships, button clicks, every single one, and you know exactly what scene that's from, exactly what's happening on screen. It's like, oh shit. Like all the Jabba's, like the palace doors, like, I mean, they're so specific. Like Ben Burtt is a genius. And you also realize, I wish I could have said this earlier, but you also realize how important sound is to cutting Star Wars, because the whole world is built not on screen, but what you hear off screen. And I think that's one of the things we spend so much time doing in previs is just designing the soundscape so that you can sell the episode. Because without, you don't put any like Star Wars sounds in it and it sucks. It doesn't work. Yeah. So that was
it's just some other space opera. It's
Gordon, right, exactly.
Flash Gordon.
exactly. Yeah, man. So anyway, you would appreciate that too.
I have one last question for you.
Okay.
We've been stuck in the pandemic for going on 2 years now, and in that time, a lot of people have turned to streaming services for entertainment when they're stuck inside. Mm-hmm. Is there a show or a movie you've discovered during the pandemic that you think people should check out if they're quarantined?
Downton Abbey. My buddy Danny McBride recommended that to me, and I was like, oh man, really, dude? Like, come on, bro. It's like, what are you, getting old on me? And so me and my wife, we watched the pilot, and it was kind of like, this is okay. This is different than what I thought it would be. And then literally after like 2 or 3 episodes, devoured it. Like, I kept asking her, every night we'd put the daughter to bed, and I'd be like, honey, you ready to go back to Downton tonight? And we'd watch 2 episodes in a night, and it's brilliantly acted, brilliantly written, beautifully shot. I mean, the storylines are great. I was shocked at how good it was, based on like what little I knew about it. Oh, PBS, British drama, boring, snoring, snooze. No, it was terrific and inspiring too.
Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you today.
Oh man, my pleasure.
And that's it for this week. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com for all our latest courses. And of course, follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. I'm Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching. Today's episode of Filmmaker U is brought to you by our sponsors, OWC. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking and computer needs. And it's also brought to you by our other sponsors, AJA. Make sure to check out aja.com so that you can see how they can help you in your post-production needs.